In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to talk about XSSs, one of the most common web vulnerabilities, and most importantly, I'm going to talk about why we should care about XSSs. So, you know stuff about me already. What I can also add is that you can find the presentation on bentkowski.info/testdive2018, so you can see it on your mobile phone or on your laptop, whatever you want. Questions that you know that you need to ask questions via the Slido. So let's focus on the main thing in the presentation, so on the cross-site scripting, one of the most common vulnerabilities in web applications. First question for you is that who knows what XSS is? Hands up. Okay, not that many. So let's see what XSS is all about, the cross-site scripting, on a very simple example. We have a page in which we can input our name. So here we can see the HTML, here we can see the HTML that is rendered. So when I input my name, then everything is fine, nothing is going on over here. However, when I try to input some HTML tag, like the underline tag, we can clearly see that, well, something is different right now, and the text is actually underlined. And this is a very first test for the XSS that we can do, is that we can just try to inject some HTML tag. And if we see that the HTML tag is actually reflected in the response, then it means that something is going on in here. Some people use U, some people use S, and other people use, for instance, H1, because it is, quite difficult to miss it. So far, we have proved that we can inject HTML. So now we need to prove that we can actually execute some JavaScript. So one of the methods to do that is to use the image tag and the onError event handler. And when I did that, the alert1, the code that I inputted in here, actually executed. So this is a proof that I can actually execute my own JavaScript in this application. The problem is that XSSs are most often proved with alert1, and this is enough to prove that the vulnerability exists. However, it doesn't show us what we can actually do with that in the real case. So we are going to focus on that. And we are going to see a demo of a real case XSS in a WordPress plugin that is called PDF and Print. We can see a security advisory about the vulnerability. And here we have the proof of concept. And the proof of concept, well, doesn't show alert 1, but alert 10 for some reason. But as usual, we can only see the alert in here. So we will see that in the real WordPress. So I have a WordPress over here. And when the plugin PDF and Print was installed in the vulnerable version, actually every single page with a note was vulnerable to XSS. So I can add some code in here, add a script tag, execute alert1. It must be equal to anything. And after refreshing, we get the alert1. Actually, we get it twice, because it is reflected twice in the HTML. And when we have a look at the source, we can clearly see that there is some part of the HTML in which the request parameter was reflected. So this is the alert1. Now let's focus on something more real, because in the real case, nobody uses XSSs for alert1 because, well, it achieves nothing. So I have two browsers open here, and I have two desktops. One desktop is with the green background, and in the green background, I am a good guy. I am just a guy who owns a WordPress blog, who is an administrator of this blog. However, on the red background, I am a bad guy. I am a guy who wants to take over this blog. So what can I do? The first thing that I could try is that I might try to open the logon panel and input the XSS as username, XSS as password. When I try to log in, well, obviously, I get an error that this is an invalid username. I would have been extremely lucky if that had worked. So no luck over here. So let me try something else. I will go back to the block, and I will go back to a node, and in a node I can leave a reply, I can leave a comment. This is a pretty normal function of every blogging platform. So here I will input a comment, for instance saying check this out, and a link to some page. Of course, in a real-world example, I wouldn't use a domain that is called evilhacker.pl, but because of the domain, we know who is the good one, who is the bad one, so I go on with that. I input some name, some email, it doesn't matter what I say, and then I can post the comment. And by default, in WordPress, the comments aren't published on the moment that the comment is submitted, but it goes through the moderation. So the administrator must see the comment and must approve it, or can say that it is a spam or trash. So now I'm going to do a thing that we, when we use the browsers on daily basis, do many times a day. So I am just going to click a link. And when I click this link, well, I have a photo of a cat. Who doesn't love cats in the internet? So the admin keeps looking at this cat for some time. And now I am going back as the bad guy to the browser where I am the bad guy. And I try to log in again as the user with the name Xss and password Xss. And now it worked. And now I can do whatever I want, because I am just an admin on that WordPress. I can go to the user list, and I can say, well, goodbye, Mr. Admin. We now own the blog. So the question is, what happened on that page? I can only see a picture of a lovely cat. However, something must have been going on. And when we look at the source, we can see that the image showing the cat is over here, and the rest of the code is actually executing the XSS. So what happens here is that I use exactly the same XSS as before. So I have the script tag over here, but I use some eval in this place, and the code that gets evaled is actually this code. So what I do here is that I access the user new PHP page, and then I'm making a post request, and I am saying that I want to a new user with login XSS and with password XSS. Because in this browser I am logged in as an administrator, the browser automatically adds cookies for administrator. This is why I am authorized to execute the action of adding a new user. And this is the first most important effect of XSS. With XSS, I can do everything that the normal user of the application can do. So if the administrator can add a new administrator, that with XSS I can also add a new administrator. If I have an XSS on Gmail, let's say, then I can send mails, for instance. If I have an XSS on Facebook, then I can like something or share something or whatever the Facebook user can do. So this is the first main effect of XSS. And the second main effect of XSS is that I can also read some information. So not only I can execute something, but I can also get some data. In this case, I get the first name, last name, and the email of the administrator. So we know that this is Mr. Admin Adminowski. And when we have a look at the source, this is actually exactly the same XSS. It looks exactly the same. However, the code that gets executed is a little bit different. Now I'm pointing to profile PHP page, and I just parse the page, and I am getting the first name, the last name, and the email from the page, so I can steal that. So the second main effect of XSS is that I can read everything the user can see in the page. So when I say the XSS in Gmail again, then I can read all the mails. When I have XSS in Facebook, I can read the history of conversation on Messenger, for instance. Or I can see what the user likes, or I can see his private pictures, and whatever I want. If I have an XSS in online banking, I can read the history of transactions, for instance. So I can do whatever the user can do, and I can read whatever the user can read. And this is just the beginning. In the presentation, I have pasted the code that I used for the XSS in WordPress. So after the presentation, you can have a look at the code and try to understand better what exactly is going on in here. However, there is one thing that we need to consider. I knew that I worked with WordPress blog. WordPress is an open source system. I can install the WordPress by myself on my own computer. So I know how it works, and I can prepare a request that is pointing to exactly the endpoint that is needed to add a new administrator. So I can prepare everything beforehand. The question is, what if I don't know anything about the application? So I cannot prepare a request that adds a new administrator because I have no idea how the request should look like in some application. And this is where we should meet our new friend. And that friend is called Blind Xss. Blind Xss happens when the input that is given by the attacker is reflected in other place of the application that the attacker cannot see. Or even it can be other application whatsoever, so that the attacker cannot see where the input is reflected. The most obvious example is that we have a contact form on a page. We input some data, we click submit, and we don't know what is going on with the data. It could have been sent via email, or there could be some kind of back office system which is available only from the company's LAN that processes the inquiries. So how do we identify a blind XSS if we cannot see where the XSS happens? The answer is a reverse connection. So when we try to input a code with a simple image tag, for instance, and the image tag points to the server that is controlled by the attacker, and we input that kind of XSS, and after some time, we will see a request on our server, then we know that the code must have executed. So this is how we know that there is a blind XSS. And we will try it. So I have a server over here that is called Xss. I will talk about the Xss later. However, right now I am going to run a tool that is called netcat. Netcat is a tool, a very simple tool, in which we can connect to a TCP port, or we can listen on some TCP port. So now I am listening on port 12345, and I will listen to some connections. And now, on the other tab, I can go to a page, help desk, and do you have any problem with our systems, please contact our help desk below. So I can input some data. Over here, it doesn't matter what I say. Then some subject, and then a message. So I will give a message over here, and I will try to include the image tag. And the image tag will point to server Michał Bentkowski info. And this is the server on which I run the netcat. And of course, I need to add the port definition 12345. And when I try to submit that form, then I have a Chromium headless going on in the background that simulates the real user of the application somewhere in some kind of network. And he will just look if there are any new tickets in the help desk, and if they are, they will try to open it. So let's check it. I will show the shell window over here, the browser over here, and after no more than 15 seconds, we should get a connection. I hope it will happen. So when the user will visit the page, we should get a connection over here, and we got it. We got the connection, and we got some information for free, in fact. We have the referrer header, which tells us from which the connection is from. So we know that there is some server that is called helpdesk_backoffice.lan. We probably have no access to that server because this is not a public domain. This is some kind of internal system. However, because the browser of the user has access to the internet, then we could inject a code that makes connection to an external server. So we could see the request. I can show you that I actually cannot access from my own browser the back office. So name not resolved. The name is just not in the DNS. So now I have shown that I have an XSS in the helpdesk system. However, I would like to do something interesting with that backoffice. So let's try to inject something better. We will try to inject some script tag pointing for an application that is called Xss. I will talk in a while about what Xss is. So Xss is a very simple educational tool written by me that is meant to showcase what the effects of XSS can be. It is open source. I uploaded it to GitHub today. And whenever Xss is included in a page, it maintains a WebSocket connection with the attacker's server, which means that the attacker might send commands directly to the victim's browser. So the general idea, or before going to the general idea, Xss isn't the only tool in the world which does what it does. There are other tools. Most popular is Beef. However, in Beef, we don't know what is going on under the hood. Xss shows everything what it does. So the basic idea, let's say that we want to get cookies from the victim. So we can read the document cookie element. So via the Xss admin panel, we can inject the code with a function which accepts a one argument, which is a function that sends back some information. And then this code is relayed via the WebSocket channel to the victim's browser. The code is then executed on the victim's browser, and the result of the execution is going back to us. So let's see that. I have the Xss run over here. This is an application written in Node.js. And after it ran, it tells us that our admin key is as such, that there is a server at port 3000 and proxy at 8888. I will talk about the proxy later. So I will just copy the admin key and open the Xss in the browser. This is how it looks in the browser. Hello and welcome to Xss. We need to input the admin key below. And now, oh, something went wrong with the CSS over here. That's why we love CSS. Xss gives us a code that we can inject as an XSS so that the victim will connect to our server. So I will just copy this code and go back to the help desk. So check this out, script with XSS.js. And I can write some name, so mail and subject, Xss check, for instance. Okay? And then I submit it. And again, the Chromium headless, after a while, should visit the ticket, and I should get a connection, which will be seen as a new session over here. We can see that the user actually visited the ticket with the XSS. And we now know that we have XSS in a domain helpdesk backoffice LAN. And when I click on that session, I get the main panel of the Xss. And this is where I can inject some JavaScript code to the victim's browser. For instance, here I have a code that just takes the HTML of the page and sends it back to me. Let's see how it works. So I press execute. It actually executed on the victim's browser, and I got the code back. And I can click here. Then I can just read the code. And I see the whole HTML on the page that the victim is on. We can see that I written check this out. We can see that the message that I written is actually somewhere over here. So I can see the HTML of the page, even if I don't know what kind of system is that. The second thing is a module that is called request. So I can perform any request on the domain that is XSSed. Just as with the WordPress, but with the WordPress I needed to prepare in advance the code to execute some request. Here I can write it right now. For example, I can get robots.txt from the domain backoffice, helpdesk backoffice LAN. And when I try to execute that, I have an information. The request has been sent. Click here to read the response. And when I read it, I will find out that there are some information in the robots.txt. And the last one looks especially interesting. So there is this hello backup.txt. Let's see what we have on the backup.txt. Okay, execute. I got the response again. And it is somewhere over here. Oh, that's a nice backup. I can see that we get some kind of information. This is actually a little bit, this is inspired by the Cisco router, which actually had a file called routercfg.cfg, some Cisco routers that you can get the admin login and admin password from that file. So it really happens in the real world. Okay. Another module that I can show is basic info. This is a very simple module that just gets URL of the page, cookies of the page, and user agent of the user. And when I execute it, I can see that the user is on this URL. This is his user agent, and I can't see any cookies. I can't see the cookies because the cookies are marked HTTP only. So they are sent in the HTTP request. However, I cannot get them from JavaScript. However, the browser adds the cookies to requests by itself. The thing that is also important to note is that I can inject any code I want over here. So if for some reason I want to read, let's say, document body inner HTML length, so the length of the HTML of the page, then I can define in the callback how the answer from the send should be logged in the log over here. So I just want to say length is, and for instance, the data that I got back. And when I execute that, the code got executed on the victim's browser, and I know what is the length. I can just do whatever I want. I could even do the alert one if I wanted for some reason. So this is nice. I can get the HTML. I can make the request, so I can do everything that I have shown you earlier. However, when reading the HTML, even if the HTML must contain everything that the user sees, I can't really imagine how the page looks like. I have no idea by looking at the HTML by itself. So this is where the module called screenshot will come in handy. So with screenshot, I am using a module that is called HTML to Canvas, a JavaScript library. And the HTML to Canvas is able to convert the DOM tree of the page to JPEG or PNG or whatever else. So I will try to execute the code. And after a while, the screenshot is back. I will open it. And yeah, I know how the page looks like. Even though I cannot access it, even though it is in a local area network of some company, I can see how it looks like because I can take a screenshot. Okay, so this is very fine. Okay, we are going quite tight on time, so I am going to show you something in a little bit quicker manner. We're going to talk about other thing, because I can read the HTML, I can get a screenshot, I can make all the HTTP requests. The problem is that I have to do all that by myself. And, well, this is pretty non-convenient, to be honest. What would be nice if that, I will get just the basic info. What would be nice is that if I could just get, I will just have a look at something. Okay. If I could just get my own browser and see the help desk back office in my own browser without making the screenshot, without making the request by myself. And there is a very interesting and amazing concept, actually, that is called Xss Proxy. And Xss also implements the Xss Proxy. So I have a proxy here that listens at port 8888. So I go back to my browser, and I will set the proxy to Xss and to the port 8888. And what happens now? As you can see, I still have the error that the page cannot be open. However, now everything is proxied via the Xss, which means that Xss relays the request to the victim's browser. So actually, when I press enter over here, everything that happens here is done on the victim's browser and relayed back to me. So I can now use the page just as the normal user that was XSSed. This is probably the most amazing feature which you can do with XSS, because you can just normally interact with the page. I can go to the home page, I can see the subjects of other tickets, for instance, that my computer is missing net framework, whatever I want. It appears that I am an administrator over here, which means that I am able to do some interesting configuration. For instance, I can change the credentials and data for the MySQL database. So this is pretty nice. Here we have database password. I wonder what is the password. Well, that wasn't difficult to guess that it's gonna be HESC. So I am just able to do absolutely anything right here with the page that is XSSed. So let's go back to the presentation for a short while and get to the last topic, the port scanning. Because so far, I am in the world of the browser. So everything I do happens on the web applications, happens on the browser. It would be interesting if I could do some network attacks. For instance, port scanning and some other stuff. Okay? So consider this part of HTML. We have an images that points to another servers in our local network. But because these requests are made by the browsers on our own computer, we can actually access all those IP addresses. So thanks to that, we might try to do a port scanning with JavaScript. And I will show you that this will actually work. I have a module called port scan in Xss. However, the problem here is I don't know what IP range the network of the victim is using. I can guess that it is 0, 1. The last byte 1 acted is 0. However, I cannot be sure. However, there is a way to get that information. There was a very famous example of getting the local IP address of the victim using WebRTC. There is a page that is called Browser Leaks, for instance. It doesn't want to load for some reason. Okay, I will go back to this later. However, using the API that is called WebRTC in browsers, we can actually get the local IP address of the user. I'm not going into details how exactly it works, because even though the code is pretty short, it is pretty difficult to explain what exactly is happening in here. However, when I execute the code, I get the information that the user's private IP is 13 on that place. So I know what is the network of the victim. So now I am going with the port scan, and I am going to scan the network, maybe not the whole mask 24, because it might take too long. I will try to get from 98, mask 28, and I will try to scan for port 8983. Who knows what works on that port? Does everybody know? I can't see anyone, so I will go back to that later a little bit. Okay, so I will execute the code, and in a short while, I got an information that the host 192.168.13.101, the port 8983 is open. So I do a port scanning from the browser. So I don't need Nmap or something. I can just use the browser. That is pretty amazing. And 8983 is actually a port used by a service that is called Apache Solar. And it had a very interesting vulnerability that was found last year. For some reason, the Chrome works kind of odd. Okay. And not going much into details, there was a vulnerability in Solr that you had to send 3 requests: request that creates a new collection, request that updates the collection, and a request that, well, here's the configuration of the collection and then the update of the collection. So what I did over here is that I implemented those 3 requests from JavaScript, and that's all. Okay? So now I will try to run the exploit. So you need to run on 13.101, and it will create a reverse connection to my server, similar to the image with Blind Xss before. So it should connect to Xss Bentkowski info 12345. So I will run the netcat again, 12345, and I will show you so that you will see both the browser and the shell over here. Okay? And 3 requests will be sent. And when the log says 3rd request has been sent, I should get a connection in the netcat. Let's see that. I hope it's going to work. So first request is being sent, 2nd request, and 3rd request, and connection from some other server. And now I am able to execute any command on the server. 13.101. Who am I? I am a Solr. So I went from the browser world to the network connection world. I can attack other services in the local network of the victim. So this is pretty amazing. So I hope that at this point I convinced you that XSS is actually a pretty serious vulnerability, because we can do whatever the user can do with XSS. We can see whatever the user can see. And we can also attack the local network of the victim. We can also attack the computer or the browser of the victim and take over his computer. So what about the protection against XSS? Well, I could speak for another 40 minutes about the protection. So there are only 3 main principles that you need to be aware of. First of all, escape data according to the context. I link to some external sites that speaks about how you should do that. So how you should actually prevent against XSS. And there are many, many, as you can see, advices. Another stuff is sanitize data. If you need to put some HTML in your code, then you need to sanitize it, or you can sandbox it. For instance, using the sandbox tag, the sandbox attribute in the iframes. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Michał, thank you very much. Michał Bentkowski. And now we have a few questions, Michał.
Okay.
First, from your point of view, penetration testing can be automated.
Well, it can be in some ways. I mean, the automatic scanners are very useful as the first step when doing a pen test. So the automatic scanner will quickly tell you that there are open ports like that there are services like that, there are vulnerable services with a given version on that computers. However, after that initial assessment, you still need the manual techniques to try to exploit as much as you can, because, well, the tools cannot do everything. So I think that you can start with the automated techniques. However, then you should focus on doing manual stuff.
Okay, thank you. I think the last question is, do you know any popular websites or applications that used to be or still are vulnerable for the Xss? Yes,
I can recommend going to, if you're speaking Polish, I can recommend, or if not Polish, then you can go to my blog Bentkowski info, and you will find out that I found XSS in several Google applications. For instance, I guess this one is pretty popular. I cannot see that. Oh. In Gmail or in Google+, for instance. So there are large amount of XSS in real-world applications. Google has a bug bounty program, and they pay for finding the XSS. So if you like the XSS, you can try your luck in bug bounty.
Okay. Michał, that was the last questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. And of course, you have still chance to ask Michał even more questions in our newsroom. So please take advantage of this opportunity. Michał, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Once again, big applause for our superstar Michał Bentkowski. Thank you.